For 31 straight years, this was America's #1 dog, longer than any breed before it. And its story doesn't start on a show stage, it starts in some of the coldest, harshest water on Earth. This is the Labrador Retriever. Long before anyone called this breed a Labrador, fishermen along the icy Atlantic coast of Newfoundland relied on a tough, water-loving dog simply known as the St. John's dog. Nobody knows exactly where these dogs first came from. Most likely they descended from hunting stock that European fishermen brought with them generations earlier, but by the 1700s they had become essential members of Newfoundland's fishing crews. These dogs hauled fishing nets and lines through freezing water. They dove beneath the surface to retrieve fish that slipped off the hook. They even fetched hats and gear that fell overboard. Their coats were dense and oily, almost waterproof, built to shed the cold instead of holding onto it. Fishermen favored the shorter-coated dogs especially, because in freezing weather, ice wouldn't cling to their fur the way it did on longer-haired dogs. Life for these dogs was hard. They worked alongside the fishermen day and night in brutal conditions, and were rarely even fed regularly, which is part of why Labradors to this day have famously strong stomachs and an appetite for, well, almost anything. But what stood out most wasn't just their skill in the water, it was their devotion. They followed their fishermen everywhere, considered not just working animals, but genuine companions on some of the loneliest, most dangerous work on the ocean. When ships loaded with salted cod crossed the Atlantic to dock in Poole on England's southern coast, the fishermen would show off their remarkable dogs to gathered crowds, having them dive and retrieve objects thrown into the water. It didn't take long for English nobility to take notice. The Earl of Malmesbury saw these dogs perform and realized they'd be extraordinary hunting companions for retrieving waterfowl. He began a breeding program at his estate, and it's because of his family that the name Labrador first became attached to the breed. Other noble families, the Duke of Buccleuch, the Earl of Home, imported their own dogs from Newfoundland around the same time. Then came a moment of pure chance that may have saved the breed entirely. In the 1880s, while visiting a sick relative in England, the Duke of Buccleuch and the Earl of Home attended a hunting event at Malmesbury's estate. Watching the dogs work, they realized their own bloodlines were closely related. 2 dogs from that meeting, named Ned and Avon, became foundational to the modern Labrador Retriever. The timing mattered more than anyone realized. Back in Newfoundland, heavy taxes on non-herding dogs and new British rabies quarantine laws were quietly wiping out the St. John's dog in its homeland. By the late 1970s, only 2 of the original dogs were ever found again, both elderly, both male. The breed was gone from the place it was born. But thanks to the dogs already established in England, its legacy survived and eventually made its way back across the Atlantic to America, where the first Labrador was registered with the AKC in 1917. Every part of what a Labrador is today traces back to what it was bred to do, work side by side with a person, in difficult conditions, without complaint. Hunters and sportsmen who work with Labradors today will tell you that intensity never left the breed. Trainers describe labs sitting for hours in freezing blinds, trembling not from cold, but from sheer eagerness to jump in and retrieve. Because for a lab, the job itself is the reward. A pat on the head afterwards is all they've ever asked for in return. But that same devotion cuts both ways. There's a story often told among hunters of a Labrador who was, for the first time in his life, left at home while his owner went out to hunt. The dog cried at the door as the truck pulled away. When the hunter came home that evening, the dog didn't rush to greet him at the door the way he always had. Instead, he stayed in his bed, head down. That dog was never left behind again. It's a small story, but it says everything about how deeply this breed bonds with the people in its life.
That same loyalty and intelligence is why Labradors have gone on to do some of the most important work any dog breed has ever done for humanity. On September 11th, 2001, a yellow Labrador named Roselle was working as a guide dog for Michael Hingson, who is blind, on the 78th floor of the World Trade Center's North Tower. When the building was struck, Roselle stayed calm through the smoke, the chaos and the noise, and guided Hingsen down more than 1,400 steps to safety, leading him out just before the tower collapsed. She later went on to work as a therapy dog, comforting others affected by that day. That same year, a Labrador named Jake, who had been rescued as an injured stray with a broken leg, became a certified search and rescue dog. He spent 17 days searching the wreckage at Ground Zero for survivors, working through smoke, unstable debris and toxic air. 4 years later, he made the long journey from Utah to Mississippi to help search for survivors after Hurricane Katrina. A dog nobody wanted became one of the most decorated rescue dogs in the country. In the UK, a Labrador named Endal became famous for a single act that went far beyond his training. When his handler collapsed in a parking lot, Endal didn't just wait for help. He pulled his owner into the recovery position, retrieved a phone, covered him with a blanket, and then went to get assistance. Over his career, Endal earned more than 20 awards for his intelligence and devotion. And in Mexico, a search and rescue Labrador named Frida worked 12-hour days after devastating earthquakes, locating survivors buried under collapsed buildings, including a group of children trapped beneath a fallen school. She's credited with helping save dozens of lives, and today there's a statue built in her honor. Beyond these individual stories, Labradors remain the most common guide dog breed for the blind anywhere in the world. They're trained to detect seizures before they happen, to smell certain cancers in a patient's breath, to sit quietly beside children testifying in courtrooms. This is a breed that has been quietly saving and improving human lives for generations, not because it had to, but because it's who they are.
And for every Labrador doing extraordinary work, millions more are doing something just as important in ordinary homes, being steady, loving family members. Owners often describe their labs as calm, deeply loyal presences who simply want to be included in everything, resting a head on your leg while you work, waiting by the door, making peace with every other animal in the house. That devotion doesn't require a uniform or a title. It's just who they are, every single day, for the families lucky enough to have them. For 31 straight years, this was America's #1 dog, longer than any breed before it. And its story doesn't start on a show stage. It starts in some of the coldest, harshest water on Earth. This is the Labrador Retriever.
Subscribe for more content.